What's up, guys? Welcome to a new prediction video. This time, we're going to be talking about a second round matchup between the Vancouver Canucks and the Edmonton Oilers. So, the Battle of Canada, which sucks because, you want to see, as a Canadian, you want to see, Canadian teams go far into the Stanley Cup finals and potentially, break the so-called Canadian curse, which we haven't seen a Canadian team lift the Stanley Cup since 1993, the Montreal Canadiens. And seeing two teams that are Canadian face off against each other, it's kind of bittersweet because, one of them has to go, the other one continues. So then, you have one less Canadian team to, root for essentially. But if you're not a Canadian and you're an American or you're from Europe or anywhere around the world, this is an exciting matchup. So you have two teams with arguably, known for their offensive talent, but in this series, obviously, there's going to be other factors that are going to be important to analyze that are going to be key factors to decide whether or not um, either team will advance to the next round. So, Vancouver Canucks win in 6 games versus the Nashville Predators. I did assume that Nashville would give Vancouver a run for their money, and they kind of did to a certain degree. And when, Thatcher Demko got injured after game one, and Casey DeSmith only played 2 games, games 2 and 3, and got injured after that. They had Arthur Silovs in nets, and I thought that was game over. I thought Nashville, this is their opportunity to take advantage of their injury situation in nets and win the series and pull an upset, and they still couldn't do it. So for me, it not only shows that Vancouver has perseverance on their side, but they also have the talent to get it done. And they didn't need a Demko or the Smith to win a series versus Nashville. You could also make an argument that Nashville is not known for their offensive talent. They're more of a defensive structured team, but, you have to give, credits where credit's due for Andrew Brunette and both Rick Tocchet as well, who both got nominated for the Jack Adams Award for Best Coach this year. And they took two teams that on paper, at the start of during the offseason that people were kind of felt doubtful with, and both these teams managed to make the playoffs. And Nashville had an incredible second half of the season in 2024. I think they were like 21-7-4, if I'm not mistaken. And you look at that team on paper, and they look pretty average, and they were kicking ass. And in terms of Vancouver, they had a fantastic start to the year. They kind of fizzled out a little bit, but they picked it up right before the playoffs. But both teams persevered all season long. They proved the haters wrong, and unfortunately, we had to see one of them go, and that was Nashville. But so basically, Nashville loses the first game versus Vancouver 4-2 in game one. Then they win game two 4-1. They lose 2-1 in game three. In game four, they lose in overtime 4-3. Then they win game 5 2-1, and then they unfortunately get eliminated in game six, and they lose 1-0. And then in terms of the Edmonton Oilers, you could say that they were dominant all series long, apart from that game two loss where they kind of lost their footing and LA was up 3-1. They did manage to come back and force OT, which they unfortunately lost. But apart from that, they were averaging 4 to 7 goals per game. Game one, they win 7-4 versus LA. Second game, they lose 5-4 in overtime. Third game, they win 6-1. Fifth game, they win 1-0, which we didn't see that many goals. And then the last game, 4-3. So, third time in a row that these teams meet in the first round, and Edmonton wins all 3 times. And now it's the Battle of Canada. So that's my little summary in terms of these two heading into this matchup. What are your thoughts, Luca, on this matchup?
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. I think, if you look at both teams, I mean, first of all, obviously we talk about the regular season and just, how well both teams played. They were, two of the most dominant teams in the NHL during the regular season. And then you come into the playoffs and, again, this is kind of a likely matchup. I think a lot of people expected this to happen, going out of round one when they first did the round one predictions. I didn't. I actually had Nashville beating Vancouver. But that was just because I was a big fan of Andrew Brunette. That being said, like you mentioned, Chris, Nashville did give Vancouver a huge run for their money. this was a game and a series that I think Vancouver struggled in a lot more than I think they expected to. And what I mean by that is they were playing a very defensively sound and structured Nashville team that, didn't give them much in terms of opportunities, didn't allow them to really shoot the puck much. But one thing that Vancouver was able to do in their moments is have key guys show up in key moments. And what I mean by that is you look at a guy like Brock Besser, who scored a hat trick during one of the games in the series that, ultimately led to Vancouver winning that game in overtime 4-3, where Elias Lindholm scored the winning goal in a game in which they were down 3-1 and then came back to basically win that game. That probably, I think, decided the series, in my opinion. But then, you also have to look at the fact that apart from Brock Besser and JT Miller, and even to some extent Quinn Hughes, they didn't get, production from the likes of a guy like Elias Pettersson. And that, I think, plays a big role for the Canucks because it means that, they were able to put themselves in a position where, they were still able to get some wins. They were still able to find a way to win without necessarily relying on a guy like Elias Pettersson. Now, you can turn around and say that that's beneficial for Vancouver, and I would agree, but they need Pettersson to step up in the second round if they want to have a shot against the Edmonton Oilers. With that being said, though, Edmonton did very well against the LA Kings in a series in which, their best players were their best players. I mean, Connor McDavid, 12 points in 5 games, had 11 assists, 1 goal. Leon Draisaitl, 5 goals, 5 assists, 10 points for him. 2 game-winning goals, which was huge. Evan Bouchard, 9 points in 5 games. And then Zach Hyman doing what he does best, 7 goals, 1 assist in 8 games for him. So, again, they were getting goal scoring from the main guys all series long. And, they were able to get some production from their big players. And they were able to score on the power play, which I think is going to ultimately decide this series. If you look at the Edmonton Oilers power play percentages, I know they've played 5 games, 45% on the power play, which means they've basically scored on a little bit less than half of their power play opportunities, which is very, very good, especially in the playoffs. And they're the only team in the playoffs to have 100% on the penalty kill. So that says a lot about how well the Edmonton Oilers played against the LA Kings. They were able to shut them down on the PK, and they were able to score on them on the power play, which means Edmonton took their chances when they were given to them on both special team units. Now, what the issue is with Vancouver is they weren't that great on the power play, 15.4%. They were ranked 12th out of the 16 playoff teams currently there. So they weren't really producing necessarily on the power play. That could also be a conversation in terms of how well Nashville played defense. But their penalty kill was very good at 90.9%. So they were able to keep the puck out of the net. One key factor as well that I think is going to make a big difference in this series, at least for Vancouver's side, is this. A, they need to keep getting production from guys like Brock Besser, JT Miller, Quinn Hughes. B, they need Pettersson to get going. That means, becoming the Elias Pettersson that he was during the regular season, the guy that, can score goals, can make plays, can be an important factor. And C, what is their goaltending going to play like? And the reason I say that is because Arthur Silovs, since he's come into the NHL this season, has looked really good. I mean, yes, he had 3 wins, one loss during the 4 games in the regular season with an .881 save percentage. It's not necessarily the best, but in the playoffs, 2-1-0, .938 save percentage, 1 shutout. He's been phenomenal in the 3 games that he's played, and he's really given Vancouver an opportunity to win this series. And the question becomes, you're going into round 2, you ride with the hot hand. In my opinion, I think if Silovs is ready to go and he's good to go for game 1, you make him play. I don't see how you put DeSmith in, especially with how hot Arthur Silovs has been. But if Silovs is able to hold his fort down and be able to keep, Vancouver in this series for at least the first, let's say, 4 games of the series, and then maybe you get Demko back for game 5 or game 6 from what the rumors are saying, that could be huge for Vancouver. That could be a real big factor for them in these playoffs. So my biggest concern, I think, for Vancouver is going to be, will Silovs be able to replicate what he did against Nashville? Because, again, you're coming up against a team in Edmonton who is firing on all cylinders. They're scoring goals in bunches, right? They have the most goals out of all these playoffs. And, they're coming off of a series win against LA in which they were pretty dominant, right? And Vancouver is not the same opponent as LA, sure. But at the same time, Vancouver's very good defensively, but Edmonton's also very good offensively. And the fact that Vancouver doesn't have their starting goalie and nets, I think can play a huge factor. For the Oilers, the keys to win this series are very simple. I mean, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl obviously have to keep doing what they're doing best. But to me, I think they just got to keep going the way they did against LA. I think play the exact same way they played against LA. Maybe tidy up a little bit defensively because, yeah, they had some moments where, they let in a couple of goals that maybe they shouldn't have let in. But, Stuart Skinner in this series, 9-10 save percentage, 1 shutout. He was good in his moment. Even if they get 9-10 out of Stuart Skinner all series long, I think that's good enough to beat the Canucks. So for Edmonton, it's about just maintaining the same game plan, taking advantage again on the PK and the power play. And if they can do that and even get some depth scoring again, maybe add some more goals to the likes of guys like Adam Henrique, maybe getting a goal from, Ekholm or Darnell Nurse or Corey Perry, for example, just to name guys that haven't scored a goal yet in these playoffs. And maybe, getting another opportunity from and keep getting goals from guys like Connor McDavid, who only has 1 goal in this series. And that's pretty crazy considering the fact that I know McDavid isn't known for his goal scoring, but the guy can put the puck in the net at any moment. If he starts scoring and gets hot, like the Oilers are pretty much set. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a fun series. I think for me personally, I look at both teams. I think they're evenly matched in terms of, just defense, offense, and goaltending in terms of just overall team. But again, I think what's going to edge the cake for Edmonton here is the fact that I think Stuart Skinner versus Arthur Silovs. I think in a 7-game playoff series, if I had to pick a goalie, I probably take Stuart Skinner. That's not a disrespect to Arthur Silovs, but again, I do think that Silovs, if he can play the way he played against Nashville, I do genuinely believe that Vancouver have a shot here. So it's going to be fascinating. I think for me, Vancouver and Edmonton in 6 games, I think would be probably the most likely scenario. But I would not be surprised if this series goes to 7 as well.
Well, let's take a look at an interesting stat here, okay? The Edmonton Oilers, who are always deemed as a poor defensive team, went 100% on the penalty kill.
Yeah.
LA could not score on them, okay?
Yeah.
LA was the worst team in terms of, their power play. They're at 0%, okay? Vancouver, in terms of the penalty kill, 90.9. So, obviously, these teams defensively in the first round did a very good job, okay? When, getting a penalty. So if they could manage to do that in the second round, we're going to see a very tight matchup between these two teams that I would say 7-game matchup. But again, like you mentioned, the goaltending with Silovs, I say we continue with him, even if the Smith is feeling better. He played a lot better than the Smiths. The 2 games that he was given, Silovs played better compared to him. The only goalie that would surpass Silovs in starting is Demko. Right now, my depth chart would be Demko, Silovs, DeSmith. Yes, DeSmith was key in winning Game 3, but Silovs won you the series, and that's the guy you have to continue with.
Yeah. But the other thing too is that like you look at the Smith and like the thing is that he wasn't bad in the I think what happened was, and the reason my argument why they should start Silovs is like you said, it's because he won the series, but it's not a bad like Vancouver's in a position where they have 3 goaltenders right now that are giving them an opportunity to win. So
that's amazing.
It's really good, exactly. But it's not a disrespect to Casey DeSmith at all. It's just more so the fact that Silovs just got a shutout, right, to win Vancouver the series. Like he has to start Game 1. That's not like again. It's not to take away from the fact that DeSmith isn't a good goaltender. It's more of the fact that you show respect to Silovs by riding the hot hand. So yeah,
like for me, like Vancouver's in a very like unique and good spot if all 3 goalies are healthy, right? Because past Stuart Skinner for Edmonton, they're in bad shape. You're not like I don't know what Jack Campbell was capable of at this point in time. Spent most of the season in the AHL.
right.
I think the other goalie, if I'm mistaken,
Calvin Pickard.
Yeah, Calvin Pickard. He did fairly decent this year, but to be thrown into the Wolves in a playoff series like this, that's not too great.
To go down,
Like Silovs, rookie goalie, super calm during that first series versus Nashville. And people are saying how surprisingly well he played under so much pressure, where the Vancouver Canucks were one of the best teams in the league this year and had high expectations based off what they accomplished this year. And he helped them get to the second round, and that's amazing. Former sixth round pick, only 23 years old. I honestly like kudos to him, and I wish him nothing but the best in this series. And there's only three goalies who got shutouts, and two of them are in this series:
Yeah.
Silovs and Skinner, and the third goalie is Hill for the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll see what happens there, but yeah, so the two goalies they have two shutouts, so it's gonna be fairly interesting seeing the goalie matchup. But another thing to look at is in terms of like their series in the first round. Vancouver only total 38 points. Yes, it was more of a defensive matchup, so it makes sense. But can they contain the Edmonton Oilers, who had 62 points overall from their players? They obviously they did face a Cam Talbot and a weaker LA, in my opinion. Compared to last year and the year before that, when they faced the Edmonton Oilers the first and second time. But will they be able to contain McDavid and the Oilers? That's another interesting, thing to take into consideration. But, guys like Corey Perry that have great playoff experience, I think he would, step up in this series. But what I'm very, very happy to see is that, um, Evander Kane was very pivotal in this series. And I know, he probably didn't have the best season. There was a lot of like people upset about that, and people were scared that like he probably wanted out. But he had a lot of great things to say about Edmonton and the environment, during this playoff series whenever he got interviewed on the McAfee podcast, if I'm
Yeah, Pat
mistaken.
McAfee. Yep.
Yeah, so the vibes are there. Everyone's getting along. The team morale is high right now. Everyone's producing. It's great to see Adam Henry, who they had at the deadline, have 2 points in 5 games. Zach Hyman's continued to go on a tear with 7 goals. Dylan Holloway, 2 goals as well. So I don't really see anyone that was disappointing in the Edmonton Oilers series, apart from maybe Darnell Nurse and Corey Perry, who you would expect a little bit more from based off
Right.
experience and also talent.
Yeah.
But a guy like Ekholm, you're not really expecting him to get a lot of points. Is more of a defensive minded guy, even though he's pretty good two way. You need your guys some guys to focus on defense and some defensemen to also focus on offensive. You know,
Right.
um, uh, capabilities. But in terms of the Vancouver Canucks, if this is going to be a high scoring series, Philip Hronek's going to have to step up. That was one guy that was pretty disappointing. A defenseman who is on a contract year, had a very good season this year with the Vancouver Canucks. He kind of let me down in the first round. I was expecting him to step up a little bit more offensively. But but two guys in particular that really, really surprised me this series: Nikita Zadorov and Elias Lindholm. Two guys that they acquired this year that people
Yeah.
were not too happy with in terms of how they fit on the team. There was rumors that both these guys were going to be flipped at the deadline because they weren't, working out with the team, and they stepped up big this series.
Right.
Zadorov, you know, his physical presence, but also his offensive presence was there. Lindholm, scoring the OT winner, to win that game. That was very clutch as well. But, Dakota Joshua, continuing, uh, you know, to go on a tear this whole season, the most underrated forward, I would say, on the Vancouver Canucks, continue to be a pivotal part to their success. But they're going to have to score a lot more goals because as of right now, Brock Besser has the most with 4, and everyone else either has 2, 1, or most of the team has 0 goals. So if this is gonna be a high scoring game, like you said, Pedersen, Quinn Hughes, they're gonna have to start getting some goals. Even JT Miller, to a certain extent, is gonna have to step up and get some goals. But in terms of the NHL, in terms of stats, McDavid is leading right now with 12 points, followed by Draisaitl, followed by Bouchard. So the top three in terms of points are all Edmonton Oiler players. And then if you go all the way down, Zach Hyman is tied for 9th. So you don't really have anybody in the top 9 here that belongs to the Vancouver Canucks. So Vancouver's gonna have to step up offensively. They show what they're capable of doing defensively, but offensively they're gonna have to step up. I would say as of right now, Edmonton is the pick that I go with in 7 games. But again, the Vancouver Canucks have what it takes to upset the Edmonton Oilers because I do believe as of right now, the Vancouver Canucks are not the favorites to win. It would be the Edmonton Oilers. And, Brock Besser, he has to continue doing what he's doing, but everyone else is going to have to, step up and give him some secondary scoring. In terms of the lineup, I think this is perfect for Edmonton moving forward. I think it works out. They have fantastic center depth. The fact that you have Adam Henry playing on the top line as a left winger as opposed to center, that's how deep it shows in terms of their center depth. Their wingers probably one of the best in the league in terms of their depth. They have people that could jump into the top six or bottom six when need to, when need be. If sorry, their defense on honestly like probably the best defensive core they've had in a very long time as well. We said that all year long. It was also great to see Brett Kulak step up in this playoff series as well. Um, Cody Cece, obviously would be the weakest guy in this core, but you know they're doing well in terms of the Vancouver Canucks. Um, their lineup, they have a lot of great depth forwards as well. A guy like Lindholm on any other team would be playing as a first line or second line center. So they have a great center depth as well. You have, Teddy Bluger, who's won the Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights in the past. P.I. Suter, playing the hero last game to eliminate the Nashville Predators, scoring the winning goal, playing on the top line with JT Miller and Besser. They have that. This is the beauty about both teams. They have a lot of Swiss Army knives, a lot of guys that you could plug in the bottom six, but also in the top six, and a lot of guys that are interchangeable. And in
Yeah.
terms of their defensive pairings, they did a big cleanup the last couple of years in terms of their decor, and I think they finally figured out a decor that's very well balanced, and it's shown throughout the whole year. But I would say that their guys defensively are fantastic, but when you have a guy like Zadora that's stepping up offensively, that's good, but it's also bad, considering that Ronick, didn't register a point in the first round. So, they have Tyler Myers, they have Susie, Ian Cole, Zadorov, very, heavy defensive defensemen that have, I would say Zadorov is probably the best in terms of his offensive, capabilities out of those four guys. But, their offense is heavily relied on, the top pairing of Ronick and Hughes.
Yeah, I think for me, you look at the Oilers, and it's more of a complete team in terms of like where their offense is coming from. I do believe Vancouver has a better decor, which could win them games. In terms of just how good it is, and how great Quinn Hughes has been this season, both offensively and defensively. Like you mentioned, a guy like Nikita Zadorov stepping up this playoffs. Even Tyler Myers on that block that he made against Nashville during the 1-0 win. That was huge for them. So he's played some really good playoff hockey as well. So for sure, Vancouver's got an upper end in terms of just their decor, in terms of how well they've played. I mean, they've let in less goals. Granted, they've played one more game than the Edmonton Oilers, so that's always impressive to look at as well. But I think for Vancouver, like I mentioned before, right, it's going to be about are they going to be able to get scoring from their big guys, right? Is like I said before, is Brock Besser going to continue to fire on all cylinders? Is JT Miller going to add more than one goal in these playoffs? Is Pedersen going to get going? If they're able to get, like I said, goal scoring from those three guys particularly, maybe Quinn Hughes adds a goal here or there. Elias Lindholm as well continues to maybe add one or two more goals or three more goals in these playoffs. That could be huge for them, right? Because we know what to expect with the Oilers, right? Zach Hyman's going to stand in front of the net and probably score. McDavid's going to be McDavid, and Draisaitl's going to be Draisaitl. We know this already, right? But if Vancouver can match that by providing good defensive hockey, right, getting saves from their goaltending when they need to, and getting production from their big guys, it can be a closer series. Like I look at this series and I don't have, let's say, a clear-cut favorite in the sense where I'm like, oh my God, I think the Oilers are absolutely going to run and steamroll the Canucks. They might, right, just based on goaltending. But even at that, like, I don't look at Edmonton and say, oh my God, like this is a series that they must win. But it probably is their best chance of winning this series because Vancouver isn't fully healthy in terms of the fact that they don't have their starting goaltender. And that's a big important factor, right? Because as much as you can turn around and say, yeah, okay, well, if Solov sucks in game one, maybe you go to DeSmith in game two. Fine, sure, but it's still not Thatcher Demko, right? And that plays a huge role in a playoff series when you don't have your number one goaltender in net, the guy you've relied upon all season, and the Vezina winner, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how Vancouver is able to manage this and how they're going to be able to, overcome the loss of Thatcher Demko. And also, I mean, they've done a good job of it so far. Will that continue? And then the other question is Edmonton is a very physical team, right? You look at some of the guys that they have on their team, guys like Sam Carrick, guys like Corey Perry, guys like Evander Kane. Like, this is a team, Darnell Nurse, this is a team that, are not afraid to put themselves in positions to get into fights, to be physical, to be aggressive, to get into scrums after the whistle, right? Like, you look at some of the penalty minutes, and I know that it's not necessarily a good thing, penalty minutes, but Evander Kane, 15 penalty minutes. Evan Bouchard, 14 penalty minutes. Like, these are guys that are not afraid to put themselves in a position where if they have to fight, they have to fight. Or if they have to put themselves in a position where they have to throw a big hit or become aggressive to stir the pot during the game, they're able to do that. Whereas Vancouver, like, I look at their roster, yeah, Zadorov is a guy who can throw some big hits here and there. Ian Cole, Teddy Bluger, those guys are feisty players that can do it as well. But I don't think they have the they don't have that firepower, aggressive type of, big bad hockey that you usually get in the playoffs where it's
Yeah,
like,
you're right. But
don't mess with them.
I would
So,
say that
so I
I
think that that's a factor too.
I would say that, like, JT Miller is a guy that's not afraid to get into scrums. You
No,
saw
yeah.
him do that against the Nashville Predators. Dakota
I
Joshua is
I
another
just think
guy.
Edmonton does it better. I'm not saying Vancouver can't do it. I'm just saying Edmonton has the players and do it better. And like, we all know that, like, Evander Kane is the type of guy that, like, if you put him in a playoff series, like, he has 3 points in 6 games, but he's the guy that's going to be a pain in the ass. Like, he's going to be a pain in the ass. And that's the thing with Vancouver is, are they going to be able to deal with that? Zach Hyman, who scored 7 goals and is a net front presence, he's a pain in the ass to play against, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's not necessarily the easiest matchup. Whereas when Nashville, like, they had guys, Nashville wasn't the most, a complete team on paper, and they were a lot more young, right? So Vancouver had not an easier time, but it's easier to, play a team that is more structured and not necessarily the most physical team, and then playing a team like, let's say, Edmonton or Vegas or Dallas, or even to some extent, if you look in the East, like Florida or Boston, right? So there's factors to that too that I think plays into consideration, that it's a different matchup for Vancouver than it was in the first round, and it is a different matchup for Edmonton. But again, you're going from a team in LA who was very good defensively to a team in Vancouver that's very good defensively. So
yeah, but you could say that Vancouver dealt with that fairly well in terms of the aggression part, because Nashville has the likes of, like, Michael McCarron, Roman Yossi, uh, Sherwood as well, Craig Smith, and most importantly Jeremy Lawson, who was a pain in the ass as well, and they did well against a physical hockey team. So
I
yeah,
guess,
I would say that the Edmonton Oilers are more physical, and they have physical players as forwards and as defensemen. Whereas
right?
Vancouver, I would say they have more of most of their most of their aggressive players that are gonna play gritty, Western type of hockey comes more from their back end, their defensemen. Whereas you only have probably Dakota Joshua, Miller, and Sam Lafferty, and sorry, I would also throw in Bluger as well, that play that gritty type of style. And
Yeah,
everyone else is more known for their skill or their two-way game. Um, so yeah, I do agree with that. But Vancouver did a good job handling the aggressive part in terms of what the Nashville Predators, threw their way. So I mean, I don't think that's necessarily going to be a problem. It could be a factor, yes, but I think Vancouver knows how to match up against that. They faced them, throughout the season as well. They faced
yeah,
the Nashville Predators, who are
that's true.
known for aggression and their defensive system. But I would like to throw in one last thing. Rick Tocchet of the Vancouver Canucks and Chris Knobloch of the Edmonton Oilers deserve so much credit for where these two teams are. Chris Knobloch, taking a team that was, you know, in a really bad position, almost dead last in the NHL at the start of the season. All expectations were thrown out the window. At one point, people were like, what's going on with the Edmonton Oilers? And he put this team on his back and brought them to a in a playoff position, and also managed to finish second in their division. Whereas Vancouver, missed the playoffs last year. So much drama last year, and Rick Tocchet said, "Screw the noise" when he came in, and has put this team on his back as well, and helped Vancouver win their division.
Yeah,
And you see, there's so many players under him that are succeeding. that are doing so much better than last year. Guys in particular that I want to point out: Tyler Myers, that received so much hate in the past, finally working well under a Rick Tocchet system. Connor Garland is another guy as well. Dakota Joshua is another guy as well. So I'd like to point that out as well. So you know, probably No Block deserved to be a nominee for the Jack Adams, with Andrew Burnett and Rick Tocchet, but that was not the case, unfortunately. And Rick Bonus got it with the Winnipeg Jets. Do I necessarily agree with that? You know, yes and
Eh,
no, but whatever. I would put Chris Noblock over him, in my opinion. And a lot of people said the same thing as well. But guys, this is only going to be a 5-game series. If Vancouver does not figure out a way to put the puck in the net, and if Silovs, chokes. But apart from that, I have high expectations that Vancouver is going to put on a great show, and they're going to force 6 to 7 games. I say ultimately Edmonton takes it in 7. Silovs, cool, calm, and collective in the first series. He will continue to do what he's doing. And if it doesn't work out, will they have potentially Demko who could come back? But, they're saying earliest, at the end of the second round, or latest Western Conference final. So we'll see what happens. But they also have Casey DeSmith as well. And Stewart, very impressive, I have to say. And I think finally Edmonton Oilers have a great starting goaltender on their hands moving forward. And they won't have to worry about a starting goaltender for the next couple of years. So Stewart continues to get better,
agreed.
which makes the Edmonton Oilers better. But guys, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Who wins this series, the Vancouver Canucks or the Edmonton Oilers? At the end of the day, this is our prediction, our analysis. We're all going to have different, thoughts. We'd like to hear it in the comment section below. Uh, make sure to write, who wins, Vancouver or Edmonton. How many games will it take? And make sure to like, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Young Guns podcast. We're awaiting the winner between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Boston Bruins, and who will come out of that series victorious and face the Florida Panthers. And both those teams are gonna want a rematch versus Florida, because Toronto lost in the second round versus them. So it'll be a second round rematch from last year, and Boston wants revenge after blowing a 3-1 lead last year in the first round to Florida. So that's going to be interesting. And also, Colorado's awaiting the winner of Dallas and Vegas. Will they face the former Stanley Cup champions in Vegas, or will they face the Dallas Stars, arguably the best team all around this season?
Yeah.
So, guys, we'll see you soon. And thank you so much, guys, for watching.